preparing to. Setting up. Done. Well, it looks like we're live streaming. So welcome to everybody. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, and good evening for wherever you're listening from. Welcome to Outreach Noah Studies in Genesis. Good evening, everybody in the Zoom room. And if Terry, you'd like to introduce everybody?
Yeah, of course, we got Ronald down there in the engine room running everything for us. And well is with us tonight, and Bob and Christina, and see, Veronica is with us, and Joanne. How's everyone doing? They're doing okay.
We're kicking tall. Kicking high.
We're kicking tall. There you go. We're kicking tall. Anything come in from last week, Ronald, we need to discuss before we get going tonight?
No, there isn't actually. It's been a bit quiet lately. But if you do have any questions, if you can just email them to us at outreachnoah@gmail.com, and we will reply to you, or we will let you know that we're placing them in the basket for when we do our upcoming Q&A session.
Exactly right. Okay, tonight we are going to continue in Genesis chapter 2. We're going to strive to get through verses 19 through 22, I believe. Is that what I told you, Ronald?
Yes, that's correct. I had to alter that this morning. I put up to verse 20, and then I realised it when I was walking the dog, so I quickly came home and edited all the...
Yeah, it's not a whole lot tonight. We're going to be getting, it's leading up to, again, some really, really good good passages that has had some misinterpretations, misunderstandings in the future, which we'll be looking at them through the eyes of the Torah sages, through the Hebrew language. And so, like I said, we're getting up to some really good stuff here at the end of chapter 2, into chapter 3 and chapter 4. We've got a lot of good material that lays out ahead of us. Some of my most favorite studies comes out of chapter 4. Of course, chapter 2, 16, we covered that. Actually, I'm still going over that. I'm been reading some stuff even this morning, wanting to do a little writing on it, on chapter 2 and 16 and 17 that we've gone over. But we're going to continue in here in verse 19 tonight, and I want to welcome, see, who is that? Linda just came in. Welcome, Linda. Verse 19 says, "Then God herded together from the ground all the animals of the field, all the birds of the sky, and brought them to the man, so what he would call them, and everything that man as a living personality calls it, that is its name." Now, like I said, I'm going through, and my primary source is Rabbi Samson R. Hirsch's Chumash, and this is his translation of the English, of the Hebrew into English. It will read a little bit different than some of your other standard English translations. It reads a little bit different than the Art Scroll. The reason why is the way he translates certain words, and like you'll see a lot in English translation, and it says, "Then God formed together," because the first word is vayetzer, which is generally the word formed. But as he discusses here, that the animals had already been formed. He wasn't forming them at this point in time. They had already been formed. So Rabbi Hirsch says, so really this word that's normally translated is as formed needs to be understood and looked at in the aspect that the Creator herded them, and he's looking at the different words that ties in with this word that's translated form in other passages, especially in the early Genesis, but in Deuteronomy and some other places, the way this word is used, it has a root to itself, which gives form to material, listing in its dimensions. He says, as it is designed. And so he finds too here in this sense that this passage is dealing with materials that was already designed and set forth. And so he uses the word herded. Let me read that again. God herded the animals into him. And it lines up with when he compares it with other Hebrew words that uses this word in the realm of bringing together other objects. It fits this passage much better as to be herded and not formed, because the Creator was bringing these animals together to Adam so that he could give them a name. And what's interesting here is it's the same wording in the Hebrew that we find when God created the other creatures. And when we were looking at the creation week a while back, you can go back and look at those videos and you'll see we talked about how the translation here is interesting, because it says living creatures in most translation, or creatures, when the Hebrew is actually nefesh chai, and which means a living soul. It's nefesh chai. It's a living soul that's translated as creatures. But in this passage, the nefesh chai that he's talking about here toward the end of the passage is Adam. It says Adam nefesh chai, where it says, and every living thing that the man as a living personality calls it. And so he brings out attention to the word nefesh chai. It's mentioned after Adam, the name Adam, or man, what's translated as man. And so he says here, the nefesh chai is written after the word Adam. This indicates that it defines a trait of the Adam. And again, remember, and we'll see here, I think he mentions it again, the Adam is a species, not a pronoun of a man. It is a species. So the species is a nefesh chai. He says, man bestows names on the creatures, not as a God, who alone can recognize the essence of things, but merely as a living soul, subjectively from his individual viewpoint. So Adam is naming the animals as he too is a living soul, but not as God. And his seeing and understanding is limited. And he's approaching the naming of the animals not by their very essence as God would have done it, but what he saw and what he understands. He said, man is essentially a living soul, an individual who receives impressions from without, accepting the capable or rejecting the incompatible, or the compatible, accepting the compatible and rejecting the incompatible. Based on these impressions, he assigns names to the creatures. Through these names, he expresses the impressions of the creatures. This constitutes his whole knowledge of them. and thereby assigns the creatures their name or their place. Because it's also the word that's translated his name is also their place. He assigns their place. Classifying them into their kinds of species. Now he's even dividing the animals according to the species, their names and their species as he sees it. And we see that even today within science, as science comes across, over the last couple of decades, there's been new things that have been found in areas of the earth man has never really got to be before, like in the depths of the oceans and things like that. There's these new creatures, and we've named them according to, even giving some of them a species name, and it's kind of continuing on a trait of Adam of naming these animals and these things that man's never seen before. One of the cool things is, speaking of that just came to my memory, the man that found the Titanic, who studies deep sea, and I watched an interview with him several years ago, and he said that he would hope that his name would not be known as the one who found the Titanic, but he is a scientist of the deep sea oceans. And that's what he wanted to be named for. And he showed some videos of, they found some underwater volcanic area. And they got their underwater submarines, the small ones, over with the cameras and stuff on it. And it was so hot that it almost melted the materials of these remote control cameras that they had down in this depth. But in this heat around these volcanic areas that was deep down into the, in the ocean, there was these worms that would come up out of the earth in this heat that was hot enough almost to melt the cameras. And they were these living little animals that was living in that. And he goes, this is what I want to be known for. Not the Titanic, but the discovery. He found an underground lake in a cave, upside down. Had video footage of it. It was amazing. Stuff that we would, regular human beings would never, ever get to see. But that's what he does. That's what his passion is studying the depths of the oceans. Going, he's really going where no man's gone before. And so we see here that, in a way, that trait that God gave the first man, the first Adam, carries on within those who have the opportunity to come across things that, man has not seen before. And they're able, from their intellect and their knowledge, the without, as Rabbi Hirsch says, to be able to classify them in their kinds and to give them names. It says, we perceive things and discern their nature and accordingly assign their names, but man's knowledge is merely subjective, as implied. And man names them, it says, and every name that man would call it, it stays. That's one thing that the Creator had written in his Torah, that as a living personality, as a living soul, whatever Adam called these animals at that time, and the species, the division, remained. It says that remains its name. So he goes on, man names things for himself from his own subjective viewpoint through the impressions that he receives of them, according to what they are to him. But mortal man cannot grasp the essence of things as God. Thus, the value of all human knowledge is severely limited. Nevertheless, to counter the skeptics, the Scripture says that the names remained. Man's knowledge derived from the impressions that he had received, even even if it is not the most perfect example of truth, the truth is still contained there. God created man and also all other creatures, and he brought their other creatures to the man so that he should name them according to their impressions that he received. And God also ensured man that the measure of insight into the created things that was granted to him is not a delusion. You know, like an example I was sharing at work with, not at work, but last Friday night we have a group, we get together at our local Mexican restaurant. And one of our ladies that meets with us, she has a business where she rescues dogs. And she's got a big business at doing that and placing them and helping adoptions and things like that. And we were just talking about the nature, you know, of dogs, you know, different dogs. And I mentioned to him, I said, you might find that the Hebrew name for a dog is very interesting. And they go, what is it? It's Caleb. That is the Hebrew word for dog, Caleb. And I said, do you know what that means? What? It was all heart. See, when Adam saw them and gave them the name Caleb, he saw that they were all heart. And dogs in their nature really are, unless they've been abused and their heart's broken, and then they're broken. But people like Donna can help bring them back. That's what she does, is to help break some of them. Maybe she rescued one the other day that had been just chained up outside and left. And just left to live its life on a chain, and she went and got it, rescued it, and has been nurturing it back. But this was what Adam called him. He called him Caleb, just like he did the other animals. Rabbi Hirsch says this insight continues only as a fraction of truth, but this too is truth. Even though we don't know the essence of an animal into its deepest part of its animal soul, like God does, God permitted Adam to have a certain amount of understanding and knowledge to name them, and then God let those names stay. He didn't change them because it was truth. And as Rabbi Hirsch says, it is the truth that requires for his mission on earth, and he can put his confidence in this truth. Thus, believing God, creator of man and the world, is also the basis of man's theoretical knowledge. Without this belief, the scientists could not fend off the hopeless skepticisms. They could not be sure that they were not deducing a dream from a dream, or proving a dream by a dream. The name giving depends on knowledge of things, even if only subjective knowledge. It is clearly evident in our verse that God brought all living creatures to man so that he should see that there was no helpmate among them. See, in the process of naming them, he didn't find one that matched his own soul. Verse 20. Man gave names to all cattle, to all birds of the sky, every animal of the field, but he found no helper fitting to man. As we just said, God brought them all to him, not only for the purpose of naming them, dividing their species, but also to see that there was not a helpmate for him. He had no soul connection with these animals. So Rabbi Hirsch continues, says, thus man studied all the living creatures and classified them in his mind. He studied the animals closest to him, those removed from him, and least submissive to him, and those in between. But for the species of Adam, there was not one. It says there was not one for God's deputy. Rabbi Hirsch called Adam God's deputy. He found no matching soul. For God's deputy, who was created in his image, he found no one who was parallel to him, no one who could share with him his greatest responsibility. Verse 21. God then caused an unconsciousness to fall upon the man as he slept, as he took one of his sides and closed up the flesh in his place. This is real interesting. Where it says his unconsciousness, the rabbis, and I'm not going to get into all the words that's used here, that it's translated a deep sleep, but the sages and the modern Torah scholars knows that this deep sleep was an anesthesia, was a form of anesthesia. And because he goes through all the different words that comes from this Hebrew word for dark of night, is one of the areas that this word is that it became dark as night. That these words has been used for deep sleeps, unconsciousness. But basically, as it said here, is that it was an anesthesia, a degree of helplessness and powerlessness, that he was completely put to sleep. He goes on, and the Hebrew word that's translated in a lot of English translations, especially non-Jewish English translations, they translate it as that he took one of Adam's ribs. That is an improper and false interpretation of that word. The word does not mean a rib, because it means a side. It is used. Let me see. He mentions it here. May say this twice, but it's because he's talking about this side. This same word is used in another area when God is describing the side of the tabernacle, and it's the same word. He literally took a side, not a rib. That's a total different word altogether. And it says here that he bound up or closed up his flesh, which that is the word basor, or bus, or the basor, like Ashkenazi would say basoyer, but it's the basor, that's translated as flesh, that he closed up the flesh. The flesh, when God uses this word in his Torah, the flesh includes man's entire body except for the bones and the blood. So that's why we know it's not a rib, because the Hebrew word for side is not a rib. It's side. And we know it's not a rib because a rib is a bone, and we know that he's closing up his flesh. He didn't take out a bone, he took a whole side, as we're going to see. That the word flesh here includes his entire body except his blood and his bones. Thus, it also includes the skin, muscle, and nerves. So even in some of the there's a Hebrew prayer that that's said after one goes to the restroom, thanking the Creator that all things are working properly. And it uses that word basor in there that you have, sustained, my flesh. And that there was nothing, and it uses that all the openings were open and all the closings were closed, and it's not reversed. And so this prayer is really, really interesting. So, basically the intent of that prayer is after one uses the restroom, cleans himself, then he says basically a prayer thanking the Creator that everything worked right. Because if anybody has intestinal issues and constipations in the other direction as well, it's not fun. And so they always want to thank the Creator when things are working right, not just to go praying to Him when it's not working right. you know, they don't just say, "Oh God, help me, things ain't working right." But when things are working right, we want to thank the Creator that things are working right, whether it's in that area or anywhere. Thanking the Creator for our eyes and for our ears, for our taste, for as Rabbi Brody said, there's billions of things that's going on in our body, and we should never have anything not to be expressing gratitude about to the Creator, even according to our body. If you think, well, I don't really got nothing to pray about, well, start thinking about your body and what God made, and then all of a sudden you'll have things to pray about and to give God gratitude for. Man, that was a really, really good message from Rabbi Laser Brody about having something to always pray about. Is just even within your own body. And Rabbi Hirsch says, and all the intermediaries between the spirit and the world, without the flesh, the body has no connection with the world. Without the flesh, the body cannot influence the world, and the world remains unknown to the body. Hence, this taking and putting him to sleep, taking one of his sides, and when he's done, he's closing up the flesh. And and some of my other works that I was reading about this week, the anesthesia was also a mercy, so that because he could have done all of this, he could have made everything painless for Adam, but as was one of the Torah scholars I was reading from was talking about how this was a surgery. There was blood. He would have witnessed the blood. He would have witnessed the forming of the woman. And God had mercy on Adam to not see this event going on. Because it's like my wife and I, we like watching the detective shows and different shows and stuff, and we're sitting there eating, and all of a sudden they're in the morgue, and we're like, oh, we didn't need to see that while we're eating. So you know how that is when you're watching TV or something, and all of a sudden they show this scene like, oh, I didn't need to really see that, especially if it's like they're mimicking an autopsy or something, in one of these, detective shows. And so that's what God was saving Adam from. God was having mercy on him by putting him to a sleep, to not only not feel it, but also not witness this event going on, because it was different in the creating of woman than it was with man. And we're going to see that in verse 22. In verse 22, he says, then God formed the side that he had taken from the man into a woman, and he brought her to the man. It says, unlike the case of man. And I really had not contemplated this passage before. I just have read it until I seen what Rabbi Hirsch wrote here. And I went, wow. even these small little passages that we just read and go on, God, formed woman and brought them to him, did not think much about it. Unlike the case of man, in the case of a woman, material for her body was not taken from the earth. God took one side of man, formed it into a woman. Man, as it was divided into two, and one part was formed into a woman. Now, there's some deeper teachings into this that I'm not going to get into on this, but I know Bob's probably read into some of that stuff. The more mystical teachings and things that talks about the creation of man and what he was as an atom, as a species, because he contained both parts. He contained everything it took to make the woman. It says one side was built and arranged into a woman. What was previously only one creature was now two. Scripture thus attests to the complete equality of woman. Our sages ascribe all special qualities of a woman: her voice, her character, temperament, as well as her earlier spiritual and intellectual maturity, to the way to which she was formed. She was formed from already feeling sensitive living body of man. She was created. Get this. Adam was the only creature in which God breathed into him a soul. But the woman is the only creature that God made from living material. She came from already a feeling, something that had nerves and feeling, sensitivity, the living body of man, as opposed to man who was taken from the earth. Man was taken from dead, unfeeling ground. But woman was made from living tissue. I find Ronald, I find that really interesting. Is that the woman, I never had thought about that the woman, the big difference between man and woman, man came from dead, unfeeling ground and was breathed into to become alive, and woman was created from living material.
There's a lot of verses we just skim over and don't think of the deeper side of it, such as what you just said. We just skim through things and you don't pay attention that there's a lot more involved than just bang, bang, that's done.
Yeah, the sages of Israel says that attests also to a woman's faster maturing in her spirituality and her intellectual than the man. She is generally 2 years ahead of, a year to 2 years ahead of the man in her maturity, because she came from a living source. And I see, I wrote this from down my other sayings, dead, unliving, unfeeling ground. Where Rabbi Hirsch says his body was taken from the earth. I think it was Rabbi Soloveitchik put it, dead, unfeeling ground. And there's, we always want to know what's the difference between a man and a woman. I mean, we know there's, a lot of different things, but when we look at their essence, man was formed from the ground. There was no feeling, no nerves, nothing was going on. It was a mud pie. But God breathed into it and it became a living soul. But it's interesting he didn't breathe into the woman the way he did man, because the woman came from the living flesh, not the bone, but the living flesh of man.
And Veronica just noted that man was created outside Gan Eden and Hava was created inside.
Right. For some reason my chat wasn't working. I didn't see that. There we go. Had to take my chat off and bring it back on. For some reason it wasn't working. But yes, man was created outside of the garden, which exemplifies perfect spirituality, a higher state of spirituality. Let me put it that way, a higher state of spirituality. Woman was created within the garden. So she had to start, her life started off with living material and a higher spiritual source. So I knew tonight would kind of go a little quick, but I didn't want to get into the next section because it jumps, into another subject. And those subjects, we might be here all night if we got into that right now. But anyone got any comments or any questions on what we looked at this evening, or what we've looked at in the last week over, with the nature of the woman?
Actually, what do you think that Adam looked like before Eve was taken out of him? I mean, that's a lot of flesh to to be removed, right?
I have read, and I know Bob has read in some sources that Bob, do you read where that some of the sages suspect that there was even Adam had two faces?
I have.
That was like the way the woman's flesh was connected with the man's as one. But as a matter of fact, another Torah scholar in one of my other books talked about this taking from Adam was an amputation. That was the word that this Torah scholar used, was that God amputated a part of Adam, his side. He amputated his side, is the way they were describing it in their words, modern words.
Is it his side or a side? Like you've sort of got four sides, even, one of them.
It says one, it just says he took one of his sides. So it means he had more than one.
Yeah, well, we've got a front, back, and we sort of got a left and right.
Yeah.
Because what I've heard said was that Eve was basically like behind him, in a sense, facing
That's what I've
outwards with a
read.
face. Yeah. I think it was either Rabbi Anava or Rabbi Pinson. But I saw that from a few years ago.
One of the questions is how was it that Adam was not aware of her being there, and how would Adam have not been aware that this person came? Well, does it mention that Adam was aware that she came from him?
Yeah, that's coming up in verse 23. Let's see here. Yeah, verse 23 doesn't really have why it says bone of my. Yeah, verse 23 says, and the man said, at last, this one is it. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. This one may be called woman, for this one was taken from man. And Rabbi Hirsch was talking about it. He means at last, this one is it. This is finally a bone of my bone. And he expresses that he finally found what he had searched for in vain. I was searching among all creatures, but found none that could assume part of my task and bear it equally with me. Now I have found one. Thus the name Ish signifies then not the dependence of woman on man, or Isha. The name Isha, which is woman, signifies then not the dependence of a woman on man, but rather their equality, their belonging together, the division of one human calling between the two sexes jointly.
Another thing to look at too is, in the sense that Adam was formed outside of Gan Eden, and I picture that as being desert-like. In my mind, I see as desert and kind of barren, maybe mountains, but kind of a barren-like area. Whereas Eve she was made within the Gan Eden, within the garden itself, which would have been beautiful. Flowers, trees, fruits. And you think of woman as being, you think of her as being a beauty,
Mhm.
I don't know, they're from two different areas. He from probably a rugged, rough terrain, and she, was from a beautiful garden.
Right. I mean, there is one rabbi, a friend of ours, rabbi, who he's studied under for nearly 30 years or so. This rabbi is very intellectually and very, very smart. He's knows the sciences. He's in archaeology. He's actually written a major paper on some tablets that was found in the Sinai that is inscribed in there, that it's almost a complete story of what we call the golden calf situation in the Torah. And so he's written some highly scholarly papers that Andrew has been working with, helping him with his website. He's recognized, his rabbi's recognized in the world of archaeology and scholar. And so he's got some interesting teachings on this issue with man. When we look into the Hebrew, now I didn't get into this when we were studying that particular passage, but when it says that man is built, made of the dust of the earth, the word there is afar. And Andrew's rabbi, he goes through and he shows where that's not only the material the man was made from, but also the place. There's a place in the earth that's called the afar. And it's since all through humanity, it's never changed its name. And it's the Afar Rift in Ethiopia. And he's got a whole study that shows that it's apparent this is the area in which God formed Adam, in the Afar. And then he brought him, and he shows how he brought the man, because we don't know how long it took God to bring Adam there. It doesn't tell us whether he just upped and pooped him over there, if it took, years. But what Rabbi
Aaron.
Baron brings out is that where Adam was made in this afar, this area, because it's the same word that's in the Hebrew, and it's the name has never, like I said, he's never changed over 6,000 years of man's history. And he made him, and then he trekked him north toward Israel, toward the garden, and brought him there. And man developed along the way. And so it's got an interesting teaching there based on the Hebrew and based on archaeology and stuff like that. Like I said, he's really, this recent archaeological thing that he's been working on, and he's written these papers that are known and now, respected amongst the archaeological, people of the world, about these tablets in Sinai. Is really, I haven't got to watch his video on that, but Andrew has shared a lot with Andrew and I, a lot of the stuff that they've discovered on these tablets that was found in the Sinai. And it was talking about different groups of peoples and the one group of the people that was in these mentioned these tablets followed. And when you see what they say, they've had to have been the Israelites that's used in the wording for the name that they called their God and the things that happened. And then also the nations was recognizing this God of this people. It was kind of, like I said, it's kind of interesting. It's these tablets that were found. But like Joanne, like you're saying, you're kind of right. If Rabbi Barone is correct in his understanding of the Hebrew, and he comes from a Yemenite tradition as well. And the Yemenite Jews go, things I have heard, a lot of their traditions and customs goes practically all the way back to Moses. And so he comes from that tradition and knowledge of the history of the world and things. But yeah, man would have been a real rugged area if you look up the Afar Rift, which you can on Google.
Yeah, and its northern borders aren't too distant from Israel, actually.
But he would have been
Be
created
interesting to
from a
read.
rugged area, and that's kind of an interesting insight. Bob, have you listened to some of Rabbi Barone's teachings from Andy and Jacob?
No, I haven't. What's going through my head when you mentioned this, though, is there any rabbinic of the thousands of years of rabbinic studies? Has there been anything that suggests that?
He's got a whole teaching on Genesis that he's fixing to make available that he's done in the past.
Well, that
And
would be interesting.
I want to get in. I want to get into that. I need.
Okay.
I'm not going to be on there this Sunday. My daughters are coming down.
Yep.
Granddaughter's coming down this Sunday, so I'm not going to be able to be in there with Andrew. But if you can remember to ask Andrew when these classes on Genesis is going to be made available, he mentioned it about a month ago.
Okay, I'm
I'd
writing
like
it
to see
down.
that.
Yeah, usually when I read about these things, there are footnotes referencing other works, Midrash and that.
Right. Like I said,
Yeah.
I just know a little bit about what Andrew has told me, and then also I actually heard him teach on that years ago. It's probably been 6 or 7 years ago when I heard Rabbi Barone talk about it, but it's been a lot of water under that bridge since
Yeah,
I heard him.
I'm not arguing against it.
No.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm just wondering,
Right.
If there's some
how it
references to look at.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So there's just, I mean, the Jewish people from their traditions, from the Yemenites, the Ashkenaz, the Sephardim, the things that they've gone through since Mount Sinai, they have so much experience and knowledge to share to us. Just not about living, on earth as ethical and moral people, which that's the job of Israel, is to teach the nations. It's the morals and the ethics that God has taught us in the Torah, but also just the histories and the knowledges that they've experienced, through their 3,400 years of existence as a nation. That almost every nation in the world has tried to destroy and has failed. And most of those nations don't even exist today. It kind of boomeranged on them and came back.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of this week's study. Very interesting.
Yeah, I knew it'd be kind of short a little bit this week, and that's fine because, like I said, we're going to be getting into verse 24. Therefore, a man shall leave his mother and father and cling into his wife and become one flesh. There's a lot there.
Yes.
We're going to move over to the verse 25, and we might finish chapter 2 next week. Good chance that we will. And then we're going to be getting into some really cool stuff. Cain and Abel, the conversation God has with Cain, which is, I've been studying that passage for over 20 years. That's what got me started into Genesis. Is just a little over 20 years ago, just something clicked in my mind to study the conversation God had with Cain. And it's been I've literally been studying that passage for 20 years, even before I even knew any Hebrew. And then years before I even had Rabbi Hirsch that broke down every Hebrew word in that conversation. I get so excited when we get into that.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
In chapter 4. That's in chapter 4.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we've given people food for thought especially in the last few minutes of discussion.
Yeah, give them some food for
Rift,
thought,
etc.
Yeah, just take a look at that. Do some pondering, and that. If you have any questions, comments, feel free. You can put them on the YouTube, in the YouTube chat on the YouTube channel, or you can send us an email at outreachnoah at gmail.com. And we have our Facebook pages, A Simple Walk, or on Facebook, which I've been putting that link in the link now. Ronald's, the Noahides of Australia New Zealand, is a closed group, but you can probably send Ronald a message on his Facebook if you would like to, interested in that group. But you can, like I said, you can contact us through A Simple Walk, our email address, and/or our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and you can contact Christina through her YouTube channel or her Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
considering it's her channel.
And you've got a ladies group too, don't you, Christina?
You're muted. Do you want me to fix it for you? There you go.
Yeah, Ronald is our universal brother. We have an engine room too in our ladies group, and we stall at a lot of things, But Ronald looks after us, and it's called Noah's Daughters, and it's a WhatsApp group. And we're small, but we're very, what's the word I'm looking for? We're very close-knit and engaged, but it doesn't mean to say we don't welcome new ladies. Well, I sort of started out because I just thought there was a need for things for women, righteous Gentiles, and based on things that I ask about and questioned and things like that. And then it sort of grows. So really, we don't discriminate against men. It's just that it started out as Noah's Daughters. And
it's good to have a woman's group.
Yeah.
Well, tailors to women.
Ronald knows if we needed to if there was some delicate topic, then we would tell Ronald and he would just leave, and so we've got rules, but Ronald is our operator, does everything for us, and he's just the sort of brother every woman wants, so and he belongs to us, so
yeah, I know.
Been trying to get him over here to the Smokies.
Yeah. I know I came in and took more control when Chrissy took ill to make sure it kept going, and I've stayed as Chrissy's improved, and Chrissy and I basically share the program on ours because it's a Zoom meeting we do on the Saturday. Although it's a WhatsApp group, we do the Zoom meeting on the Saturday morning here, or Saturday lunchtime, basically. And so Chrissy and I both run it together. But it's her baby.
But it is good. That's where the spoon came from, wasn't it? Because we'd all be trying to talk at once. And, I could see, I thought, I don't want Ronald to have a stroke. And there was a wave button, but, it's that small and, you're trying to look for the button. So the girls, or I think group-wise, they'd came up with the idea we'd have a wooden spoon and we had to decorate it and do whatever. So we raise that now when we want to speak, and then Ronald gives us the floor. So
yeah, Ronald is a good brother. He helped me about a month ago, kind of brought me out of the doldrums after my last knee surgery, and I was kind of down and out. And all of a sudden, I got a call from Australia, and it was Ronald.
Yeah.
And he brightened my day.
Yeah.
He's a good brother.
We treasure him. We look after him. He's you know, I think having Ronald there, that it just was meant to be, and also I think he keeps a perspective on things, and it's good to see. It's all right for us women to sort of yeah, and we've got it sorted out. But also Ronald brings another side into the story or into the discussion, which I think is good. It's good. Mm-hmm. And we know him well enough to understand where he's coming from and that as well. So, yeah, we're very happy. He's our brother. He belongs to us. And you need to put a formal application in if you want to borrow him.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't put in the application. It just kind of, he stepped up to the plate when Scotty had to step back and do his Sadaka thing. He had taken on some extra work to be able to help someone. And for Scotty, that's important. For us, that's important for Scotty.
Yeah.
You know, those who know the situation that he's. I cry sometimes when I think about what he's sacrificed to do for someone else.
I
know. But yeah, Ronald's been a godsend. I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to do when Scotty said, I'm not going to be able to make it. He's working 2 jobs now. And I don't know how he's doing that, because he was working 9 days a week at his other job.
Yeah.
I know.
And I had to get on to him about that, because he had both hips replaced, and he's crawling under floors working on stuff. I'm like, Scotty, get a young man and point a finger.
But you know,
same advice I've told my brother. My brother roofed for 30 years now. He's had to have his knee replaced because it went bone to bone because of him standing sideways on a roof for 30 something years. And so I told my dad and I both was on him 10 years ago. Get off that roof and get a young man and point a finger.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's what you got to do. But Ronald, we appreciate you.
Yes, we do.
You help out a lot of us.
Definitely. And also what Scotty's doing, I mean, Hashem must be truly happy with him. There's no other way to put it in simpler terms. But yeah, that takes not only does it take faith and dedication, but it takes a certain character to do what he's doing, you know. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of them in the world. But anyway, yeah.
So, well, we're here at the 9 o'clock hour. I want to thank everyone for coming by. And of course, like I said, we make Ronald makes a audio version that he sends to Scotty to play on the Power Faith Radio, since we don't broadcast on it live now. But an audio version does go over there, and then Scotty puts it into a schedule and puts the audio version of each class on there. And those who are listening on Power Faith Radio on the version that's made for Power Faith Radio, if y'all have any questions or anything, feel free to contact us in the same manner, on the Outreach YouTube channel or on outreachnoah@gmail.com. And just to contact us with any questions or anything that you would like. Also, if there's an area of study that we can look into for the future, a subject. I know eventually I want to get back to Jonah. May take a break from Genesis and do Jonah. I did it a few years ago. Of course, it took, with my teacher in his class, it took me about 20 weeks to go through those 4 chapters, but I covered a lot more than just the 4 chapters. there's a section that talks about Jonah the man, Jonah the prophet, and things like that. I like to bring out and teach about Jonah before we actually get into that section. So maybe we might take a break and do a little bit of Jonah sometime as well.
Yeah,
So if anyone has any ideas, just that, subjects, pertaining, to Genesis and Jonah, pertaining to the life of a non-Jewish Gentile person that lives righteously before God. That's our goal, is to help repair the world. In Hebrew, it's called tikkun olam, and bring the world back. It needs to be brought back to morality in a bad way. And matter of fact, there was a class or something here I was watching the other day where it talks about where's that at? Where it says where it talks about if you're going the opposite of morality, you're destroying the world instead of rebuilding it. And I don't have that. Let's see. I don't have that exact quote, but it had to deal with that as morality and ethics decline, the world becomes more confused and becomes in a more state of destruction. To whereas part of our job is to bring morality and ethics into the world, to build it up and to make it a good place to live for all humans. So, yeah. All right, Ron, if you want to bring us to a close.
Yeah, well, thank you for everybody for joining us in the Zoom room, and those who are and will be watching on YouTube and listening on Power Faith Radio. We will see you next week. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.